All right, Andrew. Well, thanks again for joining us. Next 4 weeks of training, what's coming up for you from, kind of give us an example of like each day a week, what you planning to do and overall the goal for the next 4 weeks.
As I've talked about previously, I'm going to continue with block periodization. So I'll have 3 weeks of the next 4 weeks where I have 2 to 3 intervals a week, and then 1 week where I have much lower total volume, but I'll have 4 or 5 intervals. So it'll be a much more intensity focused week. And as I've talked about previously, I like to have progressive intervals where you start maybe a little bit below lactate threshold and finish off more at race pace, because then you can have a big volume of time in the interval and get as much time with high heart rate as possible. If you start above lactate threshold, then you can't have the same duration. If you start below, or if you have everything at threshold, then I feel like you miss some of the top end work that you wouldn't otherwise get. So a typical example of the sort of progressive intervals I like to do is maybe a 6 times 8 or 7 times 8 minute interval, roller skiing, running, and in varying terrain, things like that. Now, what's different about this block compared to the last block is that I think it's important to start having at least 1 or 2 interval sessions where I have a little bit more focus on pushing a little bit harder, either at the end of a longer interval session where you really, really go for it, and maybe you have a 6 times 8 minute interval session plus 3 times 1 minute at the end. Or you have a specific shorter interval session where you really push hard. And this, I think, is maybe more mental than physical for the training, because a lot of racing through the winter is just, it's getting used to pushing yourself really hard mentally. And I think you've got to train a little bit on that sort of pain type thing, because otherwise you come to the races and it takes you 2-3 races to remember how to push yourself really hard. And so I think starting to get back into that now is important. So for me, I plan my intervals first, and then everything else, the volume, I do around that, because I think maybe the key sessions are the interval ones. And then I'm going to make sure I keep in 1 long session a week, apart from in the intensity week, that's 4 hours plus. Usually I'll do it double polling. Occasionally, like this week, we've been on a training camp, and today we did a 6-hour session, but we did that as a combi session. So we did 2 hours skate, 2 hours classic, and then 2 hours run. And so some over distance things like that are really good to keep in. And I think now that we're getting towards the autumn, it's good to increase the specificity of training. So maybe if you've done lots of biking and other sports before, try and have a little bit more focus on roller skiing as you get in towards the autumn and closer to the winter. But still, it's important to keep running, I think, and it's still important to have a few sessions of, if you really enjoy doing other things like biking and stuff, to keep the motivation up, but maybe increase the percentage of roller skiing. So that's kind of my focus for the next 4 weeks. If you have any more questions, feel free to jump in.
Any difference with strength training in the next 4 weeks from you've done before?
Strength training is going to be fairly similar. So it's going to be like I talked about previously, mostly in the gym, and so I start off the season with like basic exercises, and the complexity of the exercises increases through through the year. So now, so like early in the year, start off with squats and things like that, and now now I'm more over to Bulgarians and things like that, where it's a bit more single-legged work. You challenging your balance as well as your strength, and I'm volume is staying. The number of reps and sets is roughly, it's still quite high at the moment, and it'll start dropping off towards the winter. So now I'm working about 4 sets of 8 reps doing strength work. As I get close to the season, that'll drop down, and so by the winter it'll be 3 sets of 3, something like that.
Okay, and you kind of answered one of my questions I had for you. If you using different activities within the over distance, kind of related question, Andrew, do you change based on how you feel? For instance, to maybe first 2 hours go running. Like say, if you're not feeling as good on that day, you do the hardest kind of activity first, like running, and then skating classic or classic skating, or either just, or you do it however it motivates you.
So I do some sessions where I change activity. That can be really good for getting a big volume, but also I think it's really good sometimes to do long sessions where you don't change activity, just because then it's 2 slightly different things. Like today's session where it's 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, it's quite easy mentally. You know you're going to change activity soon. It's slightly easier muscularly because you know you're changing, or because you're using different muscles in every activity. Sometimes I think it's good to have specific sessions where you don't change as well. So maybe so I quite like doing 4-hour double pole sessions, or I'll put in a 4+ hour skate session occasionally, just to really get that specific, just to tire the specific muscle groups. And I think it's very good technical work at the end when it's sort of like you are at the end of a marathon race. You're completely knackered muscularly, and then you've got to try and keep working technically. So I think it's good to have a bit of both. Sometimes just one activity, and then other times combi sessions where you break things up, and then you can get a big block of training, but it's not as a bigger load.
Okay. I have more questions, but if anyone has a question.
I have a question related to the 2 or 3 days. Is there some sort of time period that you try to stay within between activities, or does it not matter if you're, going to do 2 or 3 sessions per day?
That comes down to personal preference, I think, and I've done a little bit of both. Sometimes I've had long breaks. Sometimes I've had. So I know for me, normally I do 2 sessions a day, and then I have standard for me is starting first session 8 o'clock in the morning, second session 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But I've had plenty of periods in time where I've done shorter breaks than that, or longer breaks, and I think it just comes down to the best point in time to train is when you feel most ready. So I quite often feel super tired at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's not the most constructive point in time to train for me. But I think it comes just down to when it suits you, if that answers what you were asking.
Yeah, definitely. So it's all about, just getting the best quality out of your training session.
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Okay, let me read you a question we got from one of the members, Andrew. So, hi, I'm a classic skier. Was wondering if there is a drill you can recommend for classic weight transfer. Specifically, how to fully transfer weight each time you push off a ski, and how to assess whether you are actually doing it well. This is something I'm trying to work on this summer. So,
a good drill for this, you might well have done it already, is I spent lots of time doing this when I was younger. with my coaches shouting at me and telling me I was skiing on both skis at the same time, is actually just taking off one roller ski, and then you stand on one. I'll see if I can demonstrate a little bit here. If you stand on one ski, for example, my left leg here, and then you just scoot with your other foot, and you don't have a roller ski on the foot that you're pushing with, and then if you're going to glide, you have to be fully transferred onto the one roller ski. So don't try that with too high speed at the start, because if you start wobbling, then you've only got one roller ski on, and it can challenge your balance. But it's very good for feeling what sort of position you need to be in to transfer your weight. And it's a way to assess if you're doing it well is just to listen to the sound of your skis, because if you're getting the big slapping sound, then you're probably putting your foot down too early as it's coming through, and you're going to have your weight on both feet at the same time. If you're transferring your weight well and your foot's coming through and before you transfer your weight onto it, then it'll be you won't get a loud slapping noise from the back wheel or from the back of your ski. So that's smooth and as quiet as possible.
I have one question. It's kind of about, fast twitch explosivity. Is there any focus on like your longer sessions, like trying to keep any kind of, like more explosive movement as part of it? Or does that not matter at all? Like when you're doing a longer session, are you kind of going with just more of like, a less intense movement?
My view on it is that like, I'm never going to win a race with a sprint. So I've got to the way I'm going to win a race is by dropping everyone who's faster than me. So I've got to get better at working at the sort of constant race pace that they can't keep up with. And I think probably at the age I'm at, getting faster is difficult. But saying that, I do a lot of sprints during long sessions. So I quite often will do 3 sprints at the end of every hour in long sessions. That's because I think I might have discussed it last time. There's been some good research on cyclists showing that they've got an effect out of doing training like that. And I think for cross-country skiing, it's super good technical work. So when you're out doing a long distance session, it's very good endurance training. But at the same time, you're going a little bit slower. So technically, it's not quite the same as you're doing in a race. So I think getting in that high speed fairly regularly is very good technical training. So I like to put in quite a few sprints during my longer sessions. And yeah, I would recommend doing that. And also, I think it makes a long session easier because then it breaks it up a little bit, and you've got something to look forward to rather than just like monotonous keeping going doing the same thing.
So when you are kind of in the lower intensity mode, you're not really focusing at all on like any kind of little, as much as bursts of power, as much as you are just kind of more consistent power, and then you kind of focus on being more explosive in those kind of sprints towards the end of every hour.
Yeah, exactly. But I said that it's not the same technically as when you're going race pace, but there are obviously still things you can work on technically while you're going at that slower pace. So I always have a technical thing I'm working on during a distance session as well, but at a consistent lower pace.
Cool, thank you.
Are those sprints max speed, or like how would you classify the intensity? Then what would be the recovery between the sprints?
I go for very slightly sub-max. So ideally, I would do them max, but I want to do them at a rate where I can still ski technically well. So if I go, so the best sprinters in the world, they can go max speed and they'll still be skiing perfectly technically. Whereas if I go slightly too fast, then my technique starts to fall apart. So I go as fast as I can without my technique falling apart, and hopefully by doing it more, I'll be able to get closer and closer to max intensity, and still be able to go well technically. The breaks, I don't have any saturation between them. I just kind of wait until I feel recovered enough to go for another one. So it ends up being usually a couple minutes between them. I'm not blessed enough to have much fast twitch muscles, so my recovery time is much shorter than the fast dude that's good at sprinting between max sprints like that.
Thank you.
No worries.
So Andrew, I have one question again. It's similar to what you've been discussing last time and this time, about aiding a sprint in a distance training. But the question is more specifically using the sprint or explosive type of activity specifically for recovery. So you recover better from the over distance workouts. I've seen some examples where you go for 4, 5, 6 hours workout, and at the end, when you have last 5 minutes, you do 5-second sprint, 55-second kind of recovery, and do it 5 times. Or it's been also talked about doing at the end of the long over distance workout, do some max strength exercise, Olympic weight-lift, and some other activities, something like that shocks your body, or jumping in a cold, in an ice cold bath, or do you do any of the activities specifically at the end, right at the end of the long over distance workout, specifically to focus kind of to recovery?
Not on all of them, but quite a lot, especially things where I'm ending up running. Then I feel a lot better if I just put in a few 10-15 second sprints towards the end. I don't know anything about the actual physiology of it, but it just makes me feel a little bit better. So especially in running, I'll do it. And I'm very competitive as well. So you quite often when I'm doing long distance workout or the over distance workouts, I'll be with somebody else, and then it's that we always do a little sprint to get back to the house first, or back to wherever we're finishing off first. So we have a sort of natural higher speed at the end. But yeah, so quite often I'll do something, and if I'm not with other people, then I quite often finish off with a few sprints as well, just because I feel good technically, and it makes me feel a wee bit better.
Good. Okay. Well,
I've never tried Olympic lifts at the end though. That it sounds like it would be more of an effort, because you'd have to be ending up somewhere at the gym. Well, I always finish off usually finish off my over distance sessions either at wherever we're staying on the training camp, or at home, and I've not got a gym at home. So, but I'm guessing it would be a very sort of similar effect, and there could well be. I know there's a lot of good research about things like that I'm not so clued up on, so it could well be a very good thing to do without me knowing it.
For that over distance run you're talking about, what is roughly your running pace? I come from a distance running background. That's why I'm just curious. And the stuff I've been doing for my daughters has been more, the ski stuff has been more based on what we do for distance training. And so I'm just trying to figure out roughly what you call over distance, the pace, and like the intensity.
It's super low intensity. I run if I'm doing a 3-hour run, for example, I usually run 5:30 to 6 minute Ks, which is very slow. But I run quite technical trails and a lot of up and down. If I was running flat, it would probably be a bit faster, but I try and run up and down. I think it's more interesting running off trails, but so it's not high speed at all. If I speak to anybody who's good at running and they ask me about my distance pace, they get absolutely shocked by by what the pace is. So if I was
I mean,
running,
well, no, go ahead.
if I was running flat, I'm guessing my pace would be closer to 5 minutes a K, but like it's still, in terms of what athletes run, it's not particularly. If I went out for a run with a 1500 meter runner that was good, they would not be that impressed.
I hear you. No, but you're right. When you go over the 2 hours, you still start training, like, even though you're running slow, you're still training the fast twitch because that glycogen storage gets depleted. So it works out. Yeah, well for you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thanks, Andrew. We'll reconnect with you again in 4 weeks. So have a good time at the training camp.
Yep, thanks a lot. Good luck with the training, everybody. Train hard, and we'll catch up in 4 weeks.